Thank you, Mr. President, Secretary-General, distinguished ministers, excellencies, members of the Security Council. A particular thanks to the Kingdom of Bahrain for convening this high-level open debate and for inviting me to address it. Mr. President, the importance of maritime trade to the global economy is nothing new. Likewise, threats to the maritime ecosystem have also been with us down the ages. However, recent events have driven home in the starkest fashion that our critical dependencies on the maritime arteries of global trade have never been greater, and that the threats to the free use of the seas are becoming more complex and challenging. They have been an abrupt reminder that more than 80% of all global trade by volume is transported by sea. The fact that the world trading fleet has doubled in size in the last 2 decades is one measure of how our reliance on global trade has mushroomed. And events in and around the Strait of Hormuz in recent weeks have underscored how disruption to the world's key waterways can produce global economic fallout which affects billions of our citizens and leaves no regions or member states untouched. Moreover, we live in a suddenly more dangerous and unstable era in which it is not just the case that tensions and conflicts on land are spilling over into the maritime domain. It is one in which threats to global peace and stability, and therefore global economic well-being and prosperity, are increasingly manifesting themselves at sea. The reawakening of the global consciousness to the criticality, but also the fragility of the maritime domain and its ecosystem has been a double-edged sword. It has also shone a spotlight on some of the deficits in the international community's ability and capacity to respond. Above all, it has pointed to the need for a new approach, not just to the sharing of information, but also to the development of a shared strategic analysis of the character and implications of the challenges. The Council has focused increased attention on the risks to maritime security. It has adopted resolutions on the recent disruptions in and around the Red Sea and the current crisis in the Strait of Hormuz and its adjacent waterways. The international community has responded to the various threats posed to international shipping in recent years, but those responses have been suboptimal. Multiple maritime security agencies and maritime stakeholders, including in the industry and commercial sphere, have developed cooperative frameworks and practices over years and decades to cope with certain levels of threat. But the increased scale and growing complexity of the current threats have revealed that there remains something of a gulf in understanding among the widening array of interested parties and stakeholders over what can and what needs to be done, and this has been playing out in the latest events. There is a glaring requirement for a more integrated conversation and in-depth engagement over the realistic potential, but also the limitations of cooperative military means, in what frameworks and under what auspices, for delivering the safety and protection of waterways. What are the real dynamics that the maritime industry needs for reassurance in different situations? And what is the place for political and diplomatic engagement? The Black Sea Grain Initiative has already been mentioned, perhaps in conjunction with collaborative protective measures in some form or regional capacity building. These are surely important building blocks for future crisis prevention and management. All this has only been amplified and added urgency to the calls that this Council has heard for a more strategic, comprehensive and integrated approach to the more acute threats that are unfolding. Mr. President, if I may, I will outline 3 ways in which the evolving scale and complexity of the threats to critical waterways and good order at sea have raised the bar for those seeking to safeguard those waterways. First, there is the added complexity of the maritime economy itself. This includes the increasingly patchwork character of international shipping, which has been testing the limits of international regulation. Complicating matters still further, this is not just about shipping, sea lanes and maritime choke points. There is a new awareness of the connectivity of and dependency on critical maritime infrastructure, and especially critical undersea infrastructure, in the shape of communications cables and pipelines. Beyond cables and pipelines, it is about the protection of fixed infrastructure and wider resources, Beyond ports, it is about offshore energy installations and the migration of more economic activity out to sea, not just fishing, but including seabed resources, and how more broadly to protect the maritime environment. These fixed elements of the maritime economy require their own safeguards, distinct from those of protecting shipping and shipping lanes. In some cases, they involve stakeholders that have not traditionally been concerned with maritime domains. Secondly, complexity of the threats to both security and safety at sea have grown markedly beyond those traditionally employed by organised criminality. An array of potent sea denial capabilities of varying degrees of sophistication, but including missiles and various types of uncrewed vehicles, is proliferating among an expanding array of actors. This is presenting a new set of asymmetric threats and imposing increasing costs and risks on those seeking to keep waterways open. In terms of other emerging threats, the risks posed by cyber vulnerabilities are clearly on the rise for a maritime ecosystem driving inexorably towards greater automation. The weaponization of maritime data in ways that were never originally intended, through manipulation and spoofing, and even for target selection, is another concern. Paradoxically, the leveraging of data, supported by AI-enabled analysis and perhaps also aided by increased satellite-based monitoring, may be a key asymmetric advantage in delivering the kind of strategic approach required and providing early warning of emerging threats. In this way, it will be critical to safeguarding future maritime security and global security more broadly. And in this sense, the challenge is one that now stretches from the seabed to space. Thirdly, recent events have underscored the criticality of waterways and choke points to global stability and the global economy. They have also highlighted that choke points are not all the same. A strategic approach to maritime security must be founded on universal norms, but it must also be informed by a critical understanding of particular circumstances in order to deliver effective policy. The events in and around the Strait of Hormuz may be the most acute current concern as regards maritime security, but there are plenty of other potential regional maritime hotspots that will pose their own particular challenges, and these may only grow in number and volatility as the maritime environment continues to evolve. In conclusion, Mr. President, all of these factors appear to reinforce the proposition that maritime security requires a more holistic and sustained approach, but one that builds on existing frameworks and past experience with a more rigorous and robust treatment. The breadth of the challenges to safeguarding the global waterways and the maritime economy is only growing. Given that, the Council can provide the consistent forum for further comprehensive consultation on the context that threats to waterways and maritime security represent, and that they are no longer just a symptom of growing global instability, but also increasingly becoming a driver of it. I thank the Council for its attention.